Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're doing something a bit special. We're talking directly to those of you just stepping into the world of law as BBA LLB students. You guys are actually in a pretty unique spot. You're not just memorizing a bunch of abstract, dusty theories. Instead, we're taking that foundational legal theory and translating it into a highly practical toolkit specifically for the boardroom. We're literally bridging the gap between law, management, and real-world business practice. So think about it for a second. Is law just a set of rigid rules, or is it actually the ultimate business strategy? It is incredibly easy to look at those massive, heavy law textbooks and just assume law is this dry, spectator sport. But honestly, let's disrupt that idea right out of the gate. Law is absolutely not just a bunch of dusty rules. It's more like the source code of the market. Literally every contract that shapes a corporate strategy, every single regulation that impacts how the market behaves, every intellectual property battle, it's all driven by the legal framework. It really is the ultimate business strategy. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First up, law as a boardroom superpower. Second, defining the rules. Third, law as social engineering. Fourth, India's transformative legal vision. And finally, the ethics of legal research. All right, starting off with Section 1, law as a boardroom superpower. So why do business leaders absolutely need legal literacy? Well, because understanding the law gives you a massive, and I mean massive, competitive edge. Think of it this way. Justice, order, and society, they all grow from this single shared foundation. At its very core, law is simply a body of rules regulating human conduct in an organized society. It's what keeps anarchy at bay and protects us from harm. And if you're an entrepreneur or a CEO, this right here is the absolute bedrock for any kind of business confidence. Because without this baseline of order, commercial transactions and market stability they simply can't exist. Now, law actually serves a few overlapping purposes. We're talking about the maintenance of order and public peace. It protects fundamental and legal rights, which essentially means making sure people stick to the promises they make to each other. It also provides a structured way to resolve disputes, and it both legitimizes and limits governmental power. But put your business hat on for a second. Think about how the protection of rights and dispute resolution directly impact corporate strategy. I mean, when you're signing off on a billion-dollar merger, you're not just hoping for the best. You're relying entirely on the law to enforce those rights and to step in if things go south. Moving right along to Section 2, defining the rules. Let's introduce some of the heavy hitters of jurisprudence. And please, don't think of these guys as just a bunch of dead philosophers. They are literally the original architects of the systems that modern businesses navigate every single day. Now, what's really interesting here is John Austin's imperative theory. He viewed law purely as a command issued by a sovereign and backed by the threat of a sanction, a punishment. Kind of a bleak view, right? You'd think the guy never got invited to any parties. But in the business world, it's actually pretty relatable. You can liken this to basic corporate compliance, the stuff you do purely out of the fear of penalties, fines, or even imprisonment. It's a very coercive, top-down way of looking at the legal system. But then HLA Hart comes along and evolves this idea. He realized, wait a minute, law isn't just a series of threats. He divided law into primary rules, which are the ones that impose duties, and secondary rules, which are power-conferring rules. And honestly, this is huge for business. These secondary rules, they are exactly what allow us to actually form companies, draft binding contracts, and execute wills. They aren't just there to punish us. They actually empower citizens to create valid, enforceable legal relationships. So if we put them head-to-head, Austin is all about coercive law, commands and sanctions. Hart, on the other hand, focuses on empowering law, the rules that actually let you get things done. Think like a CEO for a second. Yeah, you absolutely have to worry about the coercive rules to keep the regulators off your back and avoid fines. But it's the empowering rules that are the real game changers. They are what facilitate your actual business transactions and give you the framework to build a corporate empire. And then we have Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., who brought this heavy dose of pragmatism with what he called his bad man theory. He essentially said that law is simply predicting what the courts will do in fact. Nothing more pretentious than that. The bad man in his scenario, he only cares about the material consequences of his actions. He wants to know exactly what he can get away with. Bring that into modern corporate terms, and what do you have? You have the absolute essence of risk assessment. When you're advising a startup on compliance, you aren't sitting there debating abstract theories. You are literally anticipating judicial behavior to protect your client's bottom line. Which brings us to Section 3, law as social engineering. So shifting gears away from rigid rules and predicting what the courts might do, we move to something a bit more dynamic, balancing competing claims in a highly complex society. Rusco Pound saw the law as a form of social engineering. Think of his concept like moving gears in a machine. You have public interest, individual rights, business interests, labor interests, all grinding together. The lawyer, the legislator, and the judge, they act as the engineers, constantly tweaking and designing the legal order to satisfy human demands while trying to minimize friction. And honestly, this is exactly what a CEO does. A modern business leader is constantly doing this exact same balancing act, weighing economic welfare against environmental concerns or employee rights just to keep the whole machine running smoothly and ethically. All right, moving on to Section 4, India's Transformative Legal Vision. Let's bring all this high-level theory down to the specific ground where many of you will actually be operating. If we compare legal traditions, Western theories, like our friend Austin's, often lean pretty heavily on the coercive, sovereign-based, and kind of abstract nature of law. But classical Indian thought, that was historically rooted in things like dharma, custom, and royal edict, which integrated duty and societal norms much more deeply into the very concept of law. Understanding these diverse roots is absolutely crucial, because the modern Indian legal system we have today is this really fascinating synthesis of all these different philosophies. Fast forward to the modern era, and the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, introduces this incredibly revolutionary concept, constitutional morality. He envisioned law not just as some stagnant set of rules, but as a powerful, active weapon for social reform. Constitutional morality basically dictates that constitutional ideals, things like substantive equality and fundamental rights, must always prevail over popular or societal morality. For anyone doing business in India, this sets the ultimate rules of the game. I mean, it dictates everything, right? From ensuring non-discrimination in your hiring practices, all the way to protecting your fundamental right to carry on a trade or business in the first place. And finally, we hit Section 5, the ethics of legal research. Look, it's one thing to understand the theory of law, but it's an entirely different ballgame to know how to actually wield this knowledge practically, rigorously, and above all, ethically. Plagiarism is defined as taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. Now, in the academic world, we all know it's a grave offense. But make no mistake, this extends directly into professional practice. Whether you're drafting a research paper right now as a student or a multi-million-dollar legal brief 5 years down the line, using someone else's intellectual property without giving proper credit will absolutely destroy your credibility. So the crucial point here is knowing exactly how to avoid it. And the steps are pretty clear. Number 1, maintain meticulous notes so you always separate your own ideas from your sources. 2, always use quotation marks for exact wording. 3, when you paraphrase, you must significantly reword the original idea, but you still have to cite the source. And 4, just use plagiarism detection software to be safe. You know, academic integrity directly mirrors corporate integrity. The habits you're building right now in school, they are the exact same habits that are going to protect you and your future clients in the boardroom. And to do all of this well, you've got to master the essential legal research tools, the databases, the reporters, the legal writing techniques. The law is dynamic, right? It's constantly evolving alongside societal needs and massive technological advancements. Mastering these research tools, it's basically the final piece of the puzzle. It gives you the ability to stay current, to quickly hunt down that one precedent that makes your case, and ultimately to gain a massive competitive edge, whether you're sitting in a classroom or standing in a courtroom. Wow, okay, we've covered a ton of ground today, from the very basic functions of law all the way to complex social engineering and constitutional morality. The study of law really is a lifelong endeavor. It's not merely some technical craft you just pick up. It's an instrument of order, of justice, and of human dignity. So I want to leave you with this one question to chew on. How will you use this newly acquired legal mindset to shape the future of business? Are you just going to follow the rules, or will you use them to engineer a better, fairer, and much more prosperous society? Think about that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.